Miami in 1988 was a city under siege. A violent war had raged on its streets for nearly a decade, leaving investigators scrambling to piece together the truth amid chaos and fear. Once a quiet retirement haven known for its sunshine and retirees, Miami had rapidly become the most dangerous city in America. During the 1970s and early 1980s, an unprecedented surge of marijuana and cocaine from South America turned South Florida into the country's main entry point for the drug trade. Colombian organizations flooded the region with tons of drugs, sparking ruthless turf battles, brazen public shootouts, and an explosion in homicides that pushed Miami's murder rate to the highest in the nation, exceeding 600 killings in peak years. The flood of drug money infiltrated and corrupted nearly every level of the local justice system. It was in this environment that the full story slowly unraveled across multiple facets.
Colombia, South America. Until the 1970s, life was simple but hard. Then, a failed economy gave way to a sharp rise in drug trafficking. The drug trade caused stiff competition that literally began to rip the country apart. Ruthless Colombian drug lords began consolidating their businesses into partnerships known as cartels. Death came to anyone who got in their way. As the cartel's influence grew, so did the American appetite for illicit drugs, and Miami became the prime point of entry for most of the cocaine smuggled into the country. And with it came bloodshed. Colombian assassins were sent to Miami to wipe out the local competition. The homicide rate grew to more than triple the national average for large cities. Miami was named the murder capital of the U.S. By the mid-1980s, constant pressure from law enforcement slowly changed the way drug traffickers were doing business in Miami.
They got a little bit more sophisticated. They still did the murders, but not the shootouts in public.
Drug traffickers went deep underground, organizing cells that excluded all but family and close friends. Many cells specialized in activities such as cocaine transportation, distribution, or money laundering. In only a few years, the business had become large and sophisticated, and still very deadly.
In the 1980s, a massive wave of Cuban immigration, especially the 1980 Mariel boat lift, which brought over 125,000 Cubans to South Florida, dramatically increased Miami's and Dade County's immigrant and Hispanic population share. Hispanics rose from roughly 5% in 1960 to about 40% by 1980, with many being recent immigrants, pushing Miami toward a minority-majority city. This demographic shift, combined with earlier civil rights-era pressures and the 1980 Liberty City riots, which highlighted tensions with a mostly white police force, prompted affirmative action programs and court-influenced hiring reforms in the Miami Police Department and Metro-Dade Police. Departments faced lawsuits or consent decrees over underrepresentation of minorities, leading to accelerated recruitment of Hispanics, largely Cuban immigrants or their children, to better reflect the community, improve cultural outreach, and address complaints of bias.
No police department in the country has had problems like Miami's. 1/10 of the force, almost 100 officers, is off the job. Some of them suspended, others fired. A lot of them indicted or convicted of serious crimes, including the theft of a ton of cocaine. One of the officers even pled guilty to murder. Miami hired officers who ended up committing crimes most crooks could only imagine. For example, a group of more than a dozen police officers raided this Miami River boatyard in the summer of 1985 with the help of some of their drug dealer friends. Most were in uniform, some were even on duty when they climbed the fence to steal 400 kilos of cocaine, almost 900 pounds.
Missing something in your life, but you can't put your finger on what it is? Go to www.vehiculeshop.com. We got you. www.vehiculeshop.com.
What they did, if you can imagine, an assembly line of policemen from this boat to the fence.
All the way around here?
All the way around the fence. They started passing duffel bags of cocaine, one to another. They had 3 police cars, all 3 parked right outside this fence.
Marked cars?
Marked City Mine police cars.
And they put the cocaine in there?
In there, in the back seats, stacked up to the roof, and in the trunks of the cars.
In duffel bags?
In duffel bags.
How many duffel bags, you know?
I don't know exactly, 40, 50 of them.
40 or 50? This man was there, a Miami cop who's now serving 15 years in a federal penitentiary in a special section reserved for protected witnesses.
To this day, I don't know exactly how much it was. Okay, I didn't count it. I just got my share, and that's all I cared about. My share was 30 kilos of cocaine, and I received $500,000 from it.
2 weeks later, they did it again. After checking out this boatyard from a boat on the river, they raided the yard one night when the cocaine was being unloaded by a crew of 7. Their take? Another 400 kilos of cocaine. Which is worth about how much?
About that time, wholesale value around $12 million.
$12 million. What happened to the guys who had been unloading the boat?
They all jumped into the water. 3 drowned. 4 survived.
But when those 3 bodies turned up in the Miami River, Detective Alvarez and his unit started an investigation that eventually led to the arrest and prosecution of 14 cops. This cop's share from the second raid was $600,000. His total take from the 2 ripoffs was well over $1 million. Altogether, the cops cleared $16 million. The first prosecution in state court ended in a mistrial. During that time, the defendants plotted murder to protect themselves. Leon Kellner is the U.S. attorney who supervised the second trial in federal court.
5 of the defendants got together and decided that it was too expensive to pay their lawyers for a second trial. So rather than pay their lawyers, they decided it would be cheaper to kill the witnesses.
Although they never carried out the plan, they waited outside this video store for one of the witnesses.
They were scheming. They were armed with machine guns and shotguns and revolvers and semi-automatic pistols. And they plotted, if we have a chance, when he comes out of this video store, we'll just kidnap him, kill him, and drive over to one of the U.S. attorney's house and drop his body on top of the hood of her car.
You know, there's a lot of times a saying that there is police officers who turn crooked. Unfortunately, in this instance, it was the reverse. They were crooks first and then became police officers, many of them.
Take a look at some of the job applications and background files, and you might ask yourself how these men ever became cops, law enforcers. This cop, who made $2 million from stealing cocaine and fled the country before being captured, admitted that he'd committed petty theft, that he'd stolen gas twice from trucks, stolen a car battery, and when he was 13, he even stole his father's car. 2 former employers said they wouldn't hire him again. One added he was undependable and untruthful. This man, who made $800,000 from the sale of cocaine and was part of the plan to murder witnesses, was hired even though he admitted he'd used cocaine and marijuana. He'd also been fired from his job with the power company for falsifying meter readings. Another cop admitted to breaking into cars to steal radios when he was 17. And this cop paid a hitman to kill his nephew because that nephew was trying to steal his hidden drug money. He'd admitted he'd been arrested for theft. This Miami cop, who's still a fugitive, was fired from 3 of the 7 jobs he'd held before he applied for work at the police department, the last time for stealing gas from a car in the parking lot. Dick Witt is now chief of the Hollywood, Florida Police Department. He was in charge of training the Miami Police Department recruits during some of the time when the police department was hiring officers like these.
I can recall one occasion where I got a call from a woman who was appalled to find out that one of her young neighbors was a police recruit of ours going to the police academy.
What was her objection to him being on the force?
That he was a drug dealer. Not a user, mind you. He was a drug dealer.
The most shocking part of all is most of these corrupt cops were hired during the same 2.5-year period, and some of them were bad the day they applied for the job, and the department knew it. Why did Miami hire men like these? They were recruited during the police department's hiring frenzy, which began in mid-1980 when a severely understaffed department faced overwhelming new problems. The Mariel boat lift would, some estimates say, dump more than 30,000 Cuban criminals in downtown Miami in just 60 days, and the race riots in the Liberty City section of Miami. So a police department used to hiring no more than 50 officers a year hired about 600 in under 3, and in many cases they paid little attention to the kind of recruit they hired. Ken Harms was the police chief when most of the corrupt cops were recruited. He says the affirmative action program, which was instituted about the time the department's hiring push began, is to blame for any bad officers his department employed. All the officers hired during the push were recruited under the terms of a new consent decree negotiated by the city with the Justice Department. 56% of all recruits had to be black, Hispanic, or women. We asked Harms why the affirmative action program would cause police department corruption.
Hiring from only within the city of Miami absolutely precluded the selection of the best candidates. We went from a nationwide recruiting base all the way down to a Miami-only base. The 80% minority requirement for minorities, no other department in the country has been faced on the scale we were faced with it, of hiring 80% minorities. Justice Department figure was 56%. City Commission upped that to 80%, and I'm sure that the motivation was good.
Maurice Ferre was the mayor of Miami who helped negotiate the terms of the affirmative action program with the Justice Department. His administration promoted Ken Harms to police chief.
The consent decree said that 56% of future hiring had to be minority. You increased the percentage to 80%.
Yes, I did, and that was my doing.
Why?
And the fact is that if you look at the record, up until 1979 and 1980, the City of Miami Police Department was totally, I mean 99% white male dominated. And I was determined since 1975 to get a police department that was reflective of the community it was serving.
So you don't think there was anything wrong with the way you went out and got people?
I think the only questionable part was the limiting of the selection of police officers from within the boundaries of the city of Miami.
But Maurice Ferre said he doesn't think the city's affirmative action program is to blame.
I didn't know that they were accepting people who had experimented with drugs, had been fired 4 times in the last year, were in the investigation said to be untrustworthy. I was not privy to that information.
But there were warnings. A management consultant concluded that 50% of the force had less than a year's experience on the street, and there weren't enough veteran officers to train the rookies now coming out of the academy in droves. He predicted disaster if the hiring frenzy wasn't stopped and reassessed.
I mean, if a red flag went up then, why didn't you say, let's stop it, we're doing this wrong, we're getting the wrong kind of officer, we're getting too many, too fast, we can't train them, we don't have enough qualified, experienced people on the street, let's stop and reassess this thing.
Not my decision.
You run the department.
You really believe that?
You're the chief of police?
Ken Harms said he had little choice about the people his department hired.
We were simply forced into taking many people that simply should not have been police officers. And I was dictated to with regard to selection, with regard to hiring, with regard to all of those issues as it related to new hires.
Was Ken Harms told specifically to hire unqualified people? I doubt it very much. Not accepting the blame, you know, is just typical of Harms. How can a man who was the police chief, who was an officer of the court, sworn to uphold the law and to do his job, now claim that he has no responsibility for what happened in 1980 when he was the commander-in-chief of the police department? He's the guy responsible. He can't say that somebody else is putting pressure on him.
The problem in Miami wasn't that they set out to hire minorities, but the kind of person they approved for the job.
Now, who set the standards for who conducted the background investigation?
Background investigators were selected by the department and told specifically what areas to make inquiries on.
By the police department?
Yes, sir.
And he was responsible to who?
To the chain of command within the administrative division of the Miami Police Department.
So that was your department?
Ultimately,
he reported to you?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Let me ask you to look at the big picture for a minute. You've got almost 100 police officers down here who have been either suspended, fired, or convicted of serious crimes. Of that number, almost 4 out of 5 of them were hired during your tenure as chief of police. What does that say?
Well, of the 75 people that have been charged either criminally or administratively or are currently under investigation, their conduct for which they're being investigated simply occurred after I left. It may simply be a matter of historical accident that they waited until after 1984 to get caught. But I would suggest to you that a very strong command structure and a disciplinary process may have helped keep officers who had a propensity to do things that were incorrect or bad in line. Given their background, maybe they leaned in that direction.
And when you were there was a strong command structure that kept them in line?
I would say that was the case with many officers, yes, sir.
And when you were there, these people with questionable things in their background became members of the police department?
Yeah, I think that's a foregone conclusion at this point. The majority of people on that list simply were hired during that time period, and many of them simply should not have been police officers on the Miami Police Department.
Dick Witt had to train those questionable recruits.
I think commissioners have got to share some of the blame because they politicized the system with their demand for 80% minority hiring when we were pushed to our max to recruit quality people when we were up into the 50%. I think the chief of police has got to accept responsibility for never having objected. But then even those of us in a lower rank, even those of us who brought up some objections, I can't help but feel that perhaps we should have been more strident in our objections. We should have objected more loudly, more often.
Not only was the police force involved in smuggling drugs, but homicide detectives also compromised investigations by releasing sensitive files, including witness information to cartel-linked figures and corrupt officers.
Prosecutable evidence that members of the Dade County Homicide Squad are partners with the dope dealers. Our story goes beyond that first FBI disclosure. Our I-Team report, The Cocaine Cops with Joe Bergantino and Clarence Jones, raises a number of chilling questions about Dade County law enforcement.
When the FBI agents began their searches last month, they were looking for records that would more closely tie policemen to dope smugglers. They weren't looking for murder. They were surprised at what they found. Our sources say the FBI discovered confidential files from the County Homicide Squad in the hands of cocaine smugglers. That find raises frightening possibilities. Homicide files on unsolved murders are highly confidential. Even other policemen are not allowed to see them unless they prove a need to know. The files will tell you what the police know and what they don't know about a murder. They would give a killer an opportunity to build a better alibi. The files would also disclose witnesses and what they know. Providing that kind of information to the dopers is almost an invitation to kill a dangerous witness. The records the FBI discovered in the smugglers' hands were almost certainly provided by members of the Dade County Homicide Squad. Fingering a witness to be killed is only one step away from pulling the trigger yourself. Rumors that policemen are involved in dope killings have been floating through the local law enforcement community for months. One agency went back and reviewed every drug-related murder in its files, looking for clues that would point to police officers as assassins. A prominent defense attorney with the same suspicion went to a judge to discuss his concern. One case under scrutiny by both the FBI and the Dade County State Attorney's Office now is the murder of Edward T. Forcer, a black millionaire heroin smuggler shot in his home here 2 months ago. Joe Bergantino has details on Forcer's heroin operation.
The morning of May 24th, 1979, Edward Forcer was under arrest. The Justice Department was charging him with running one of the largest heroin gangs in the southeast United States. It was a well-established operation. Starting almost 12 years ago, the Forcer heroin ring had set up supply lines to smuggle cocaine from Colombia and trade it for Mexican heroin. The gang dealed in so much dope, it had to use large donut mixing machines like these to cut their heroin. Sales totaled as much as $3 million a month. 34 men and women were eventually indicted in connection with Forcer's organization. They included 2 police sergeants, Daniel Bailey of the City of Miami Force and Robert Spicer of the County Public Safety Department. Bailey was charged with taking bribes to allow street sales of the gang's heroin. Spicer was charged with more direct involvement in the gang, including the bagging and selling of heroin. Bailey and Spicer were the only 2 policemen arrested last May, but a Newswatch investigation has learned that at least 6 other policemen are suspects in the Forcer investigation. The Forcer case was a joint police project. Agents from the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, Dade County, City of Miami and Miami Beach, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement worked together for 2 years on this case. The gang was under almost constant surveillance. The government filed its first indictment against Forcer's operation in May, but the Justice Department apparently had more evidence it didn't include in the first indictment. By late summer, a new federal grand jury was meeting to hear additional evidence in the Forcer case. Evidence that would be used to draw up a new indictment. An indictment that would possibly name even more policemen. But on the night of September 30th, there was a new development in the Forcer case. Edward Forcer was murdered. The government has told the judge hearing the drug ring case that the murder has, and I quote, had no small consequence upon the presentation of evidence before the new grand jury. That means either Forcer's murder has frightened the grand jury witnesses or that Forcer was about to talk. There are several unusual things about Edward Forcer's murder and the way Dade County homicide detectives have handled the investigation. Clarence has more on that story.
This is the house where Forcer lived at 9140 Northwest 13th Avenue. He had turned it into a fortress. Guns everywhere, burglar bars, alarms, floodlights, closed-circuit TV systems to scan the front of the house. The front door had an inside iron gate. It was never open for strangers. Forcer's body was found in the foyer of the house. It was not a swift, clean killing. He had been handcuffed, his hands behind his back. He was a big man. If he had fought, it would probably have taken more than one man to cuff him. There is an unusual aspect to the handcuffing. The wrists had been twisted palms out. It's not easy to cuff a man that way. Most people would put the cuffs on palms together. But policemen learn to do it the hard way, palms out. It makes your prisoner more helpless. Inside the front door, it appears he was forced to kneel. He was pistol whipped in the face. He was shot in the leg 3 times, perhaps one shot at a time to extend the pain. The gun was a .22 caliber automatic equipped with a silencer. The neighbors would not have heard anything. 2 shots in the left ear finished the job. The house was not ransacked. The killers closed the front door as they left, leaving it unlocked.
When the victim is as notorious as Edward Forcer, normally the homicide detectives would become extremely meticulous. They would collect even the tiniest shreds of evidence and run them through chemical analysis. They would look for everybody they could find who knew the victim and then interview them, sometimes over and over again. Those basic police procedures were not followed in this case, and the people investigating corruption within the county homicide squad are trying now to find out why.
Unusual item number 1. The night Edward Forcer was murdered, there were several pieces of paper in his pocket with names and telephone numbers on them. Usually, homicide detectives would remove those papers from the body at the scene to examine them for clues or evidence. But in this case, that didn't happen. Those papers were still in Forcer's pocket when federal drug enforcement agents viewed the body after it arrived here at the county morgue. Unusual item number 2. Some of the people who knew Forcer best have never been questioned by homicide detectives. They include his lawyers. They have never been interviewed. Local detectives who got to know Forcer, his habits, and his friends during their long 2-year investigation. They were not interviewed either. Unusual item number 3. Those detectives thought that was very strange, so they let the homicide squad know they were available and might be able to help solve the murder. But they still haven't been called. The most unusual item of all. There's a safe in Forcer's house. That's where informers say he kept a ledger book with a record of police payoffs. Normally, the crime lab technician at the scene would have routinely opened that safe, but the night of Edward Forcer's murder, that didn't happen. The homicide detectives decided it wasn't necessary. When the crime lab technicians left the scene, the safe was still locked. We brought our questions about the Forcer murder investigation to the captain of the Dade County Homicide Unit.
Some witnesses who have knowledge about Forcer's life and activity still have not been questioned. Is that unusual?
I wouldn't be able to comment at this time because I'm not familiar with the particulars and what was done or not done in that particular case.
Would it be unusual to not go through the pockets of the victim and bag whatever is in those pockets at the scene of the crime?
It could be, depending on the circumstances. I would really be unable to comment at this time.
Would it be unusual not to open a safe when you have a victim as notorious as Forcer?
It could be, but like I said, I would be unable to comment at this time. It's under investigation.
Tomorrow night, we'll take a look at another possible motive for the killing of Edward Forcer.
We showed you last night that the search of Forcer's home and his pockets missed several things. Last Friday, as part of our investigation, we obtained permission from the custodian of Forcer's house to go inside that empty house. A floor safe that has become one of the major points in this case was still there on Friday. Our camera failed, so we went back to the house to shoot pictures last Monday. The safe was gone. There was an empty hole in the concrete floor where the safe had been. The next day, on Tuesday, the state attorney's staff obtained a search warrant for the Forcer house. They returned to the scene of the 2-month-old murder with crime lab technicians to try to collect evidence that was overlooked the night of the killing. But by Tuesday, the safe was no longer there. The removal of the safe over the weekend raises the possibility that there was a leak, and someone in the Forcer organization decided to dispose of the safe before the police came back. At the homicide squad, a new lead investigator has been assigned to the Forcer case to give it a fresh workup. Tonight, we've learned through our investigation that the Forcer murder may also have involved the theft of more than $500,000. Joe Bergantino has details on that.
If there was one powerful element in the life of Edward T. Forcer, it was money. As one of the biggest dope dealers in this part of the country, he was a millionaire. He kept more money in his home than most of us would ever make in a lifetime. Money that could have been a motive for his murder, or maybe the reason for a sloppy homicide investigation. Forcer kept a lot of his money in a floor safe here in the garage of his house. The night he was murdered, our sources say crime lab technicians at the scene argued the safe should be opened. Homicide detectives said there was no need to open it. The crime lab thought that was unusual. We've now learned there were several reasons to open it. Informers in his narcotics gang say that's where Edward Forcer kept a ledger book of police payoffs. Word of the ledger book is one reason the FBI and the Dade County State Attorney's Office are investigating the Forcer case. Forcer's payoffs raise the suspicion that a crooked policeman might have killed Forcer to protect himself from discovery. We have talked to several members of the Forcer gang who say there was about $650,000 in the safe that night Forcer was killed. They claim the police looted the safe, that when the house was turned back over to Forcer's brother 10 hours after the homicide, the safe appeared intact, but that when the brother opened it, there was only $25,000 in it. The gang members believe that a thief would have taken everything. They believe a policeman would have left some money in the safe to cover his theft. Clarence continues the story.
You should understand that people in the Forcer organization are not the most reliable witnesses. They could have taken the money after the police left. They don't like policemen, and they have every reason to hurt them. But the nasty question of the failure to open the safe and make that safe and its contents part of the evidence in this case still hangs there. Homicide told us late yesterday they did not open the safe because an assistant state attorney told them the night of the murder that they had no legal grounds to open it. We pursued that today. On the night of the killing, Assistant State Attorney Jeff Raffle was on call. Homicide called him, woke him up, told him they had another drug-related murder. There were 21 murders in Dade County that month. Raffle was told that night the body had not been identified and that there did not appear any reason for him to come to the scene. Early the next morning, less than 12 hours after the body was found, Homicide turned the house over to Forcer's brother, who was his co-defendant in the federal drug case. After the brother took possession of the house, Homicide met with another assistant state attorney, Jim Woodard. Homicide says it asked Woodard for a search warrant to open the safe. Woodard says he has no memory of any conversation about a safe, but it could have happened. Whatever was said, the safe by then had probably lost its value as evidence. The police had lost custody. We tested the story of $650,000 being inside the safe on several law enforcement officers who were familiar with Forcer's drug operation. All said that figure is completely believable. He was dealing in so much dope, he needed between $500,000 and $1 million in cash all the time. The dope community knew that, and many policemen knew that. But nobody knows now what happened to the cash. The evidence report from the murder scene shows no money was found in Forcer's house.
While politicians on the county commission and in the state legislature remained disorganized and slow to respond to the demographic and crime explosion, a web of judicial corruption further eroded any chance of effective enforcement. Several judges, later ensnared in the early 1990s FBI sting known as Operation Court Broom, were accused and in several cases convicted of accepting bribes to fix drug cases, lower bonds for traffickers, disclose warrants, suppress evidence, and steer lucrative court appointments to friendly lawyers. This upper-level rot meant that even when exhausted Miami and Metro-Dade officers made major seizures or arrests amid the drug war violence, cases often collapsed, or defendants walked free, feeding a cycle of impunity, bolder cartels, and deeper public distrust that left the entire local justice system teetering on collapse.
FBI and Florida Department of Law Enforcement agents today lugged box after box of documents out of the Metro Justice Building. They were seized from the offices of the 4 judges under investigation. One is Dade Circuit Judge Philip Davis.
Completely shocked at the whole thing, and I'm very, very saddened by it. However, at the same time, I'm looking forward to the whole thing being cleared up.
Davis has been presiding in the rape and kidnapping trial of former Metro Police officer David Middleton. Today, he turned that case over to another judge and took an administrative leave of absence. Circuit Judge Roy Gelber, also named today as one of the judges under investigation, has also taken an administrative leave.
As fair a trial as
Veteran Judge Alfonso Seppi was also named today as one of the judges under suspicion. He's presided over many high-profile cases, including that of convicted cop killer Charles Street. In addition to Judges Davis, Gelber, and Seppi, County Court Judge Harvey Schenberg is also under investigation. Schenberg sits in the Traffic Division. None of the 4 has been charged with a crime. U.S. Attorney Dexter Leighton says all the judges were targeted in a sting operation.
The covert phase of the investigation has involved the placing of fictitious cases before a number of state judges. FBI and FDLE undercover agents have appeared in court as defendants in these cases. Monies have been paid for various corrupt activities, including improper release of confidential information, return of property to defendants, reduction of bail bonds, and suppression of evidence.
We've learned that in addition to conventional wiretaps, investigators also used what's called a pen register. The pen register makes note of every phone number dialed from specific telephones. Investigators say they're looking for evidence the 4 judges and defense attorney Goodhart accepted bribes in return for such things as suppressing evidence, reducing suspects' bonds, and in some cases even releasing confidential police information.
Evidence seized today, plus wiretaps on the judges' phones, could lead to criminal charges. Judge Davis, through his attorney, denied any wrongdoing.
On behalf of Judge Davis, there's absolutely nothing to hide, and there's absolutely no involvement in any activity whatsoever other than doing his job as a judge and serving the community.
Miami attorney David Goodhart, a former circuit judge also named today in the probe, declined to comment.
This is the most sweeping investigation in years into corruption on the bench in South Florida, and prosecutors say it's far from over.
FBI and Florida Department of Law Enforcement agents seized numerous boxes of financial records Saturday, but they also seized money, some of it marked. Operation Broom, court records say, allegedly gave Miami attorney David Goodhart $150,000. County Court Judge Harvey Schenberg got allegedly $50,000. Circuit Judge Roy Gelber allegedly got $36,000, and Circuit Judge Philip Davis allegedly got $30,000. Davis and the other judges have denied any wrongdoing, and so far none has been charged with a crime. But evidence to support charges is mounting, starting with Gelber. Agents searched Gelber's West 8 home and, according to records, found $13,000 in cash, including 12 marked $100 bills. Gelber was not home today, and his attorney didn't return our calls. No one was home at the Kendall home of Judge Harvey Schenberg, but when agents searched it Saturday, court records say they found $14,000 in cash. No money was found at the home of Judge Philip Davis, but in his office at the Metro Justice Building, agents say they found a metal box containing syringes and aluminum foil. It's not known if the judge has a medical condition requiring such paraphernalia, often associated with illegal drugs.
The taping system found in Seppi's chambers in the Metro Justice Building is described by our source as being a system to secretly record conversations. The system was found by FBI and state investigators on Saturday during a search of Seppi's office. Seppi, along with 3 other judges, is under investigation on charges of accepting bribes in return for such things as suppressing evidence and revealing confidential police information.
In addition to the recording device found here in Judge Seppi's office, we've learned that investigators also discovered in the office a number of actual tape recordings which had been seized as evidence.
When we confronted Seppi about the taping system, he appeared stunned and turned away without saying anything. Seppi's attorney, Richard Gerstein, later said he was not taping anyone. He used it to play cassettes, music. But the system so intrigued investigators who discovered it during their initial search of the chambers, they sought a separate warrant to seize it. When told of this, Gerstein said, "I really don't know what it's about. I wasn't aware of this, and I have not discussed it with my client." The head of the Dade County Bar Association said it would be, quote, odd for a judge to have a secret taping system.
There are Florida statutes that can deal with those things, but I don't know that anyone's in a position to comment on that right now.
The information about the taping system and the tapes themselves will now be turned over to the grand jury that's been investigating allegations of judicial corruption. The grand jury will decide if any indictments are warranted.
The corruption did not stop at the judge level in Miami's Broom scandal. It reached the highest levels of government, with heads of state like Panama's dictator Manuel Noriega taking massive bribes from the Medellin Cartel to protect drug routes, provide safe havens, and launder billions through Panamanian banks, while international banks like the notorious BCCI facilitated the global movement of dirty drug money for dictators and traffickers alike.
It was nearly 2 years ago, federal prosecutors in both Miami and Tampa indicted General Manuel Noriega on drug charges.
In plain language, what he did is he utilized his positions to sell the country of Panama to the traffickers.
The Miami indictment alleges Noriega accepted payoffs from drug traffickers. In exchange, it says Noriega allowed drugs to be shipped through Panama, provided safe haven for drug traffickers, and laundered drug money.
And what the indictment charges is that he was for rent. He would rent out his services, and the traffickers would lease those services to bring narcotics through the country.
He basically sat at the top and raked in the money and made sure that the institutions that existed to prevent illegal activity did not prevent the illegal activity.
These are British customs agents searching the London-based bank's computers. They say they may be close to finding the millions allegedly held here from Manuel Noriega. Noriega's personal drug money banker, Ajad Agwan, was one of those arrested over the weekend in an undercover sting of bank employees. He was subpoenaed a week before the bust to give secret testimony to a U.S. Senate subcommittee investigating narcotics and terrorism. That subcommittee has released documents that show the bank paid Noriega's plane, hotel, and limo bills on a worldwide romp that cost $150,000.
Shut him down. Shut him down and kick him out of the country.
In addition to its ties with Noriega, bank records show it handled the $12 million used by Adnan Khashoggi for the Iran-Contra arms deal. Also, millions more dollars for U.S. and Saudi Arabian intelligence services. And since 1986, the Bank of Credit and Commerce has given former President Jimmy Carter millions of dollars for a World Hunger Project. Investigators say that bank officials often courted favor with important international figures. Carter, who once praised the bank, has had no comment since its indictment.
The Bank of Credit and Commerce International has offices all over the world and a branch in Miami. For the last 2 years, the secret dealings of this branch and others were penetrated by U.S. customs agents who posed as big-time money launderers. It was one of the most elaborate stings ever undertaken by customs. The agents started a hot money airline to pick up drug money in Houston, Detroit, and other cities. Agents even helped drug lords finance a WBC title fight in Miami Beach in April. After gaining the confidence of the money launderers, agents sprung their trap this weekend at a golf resort in Tampa. They staged a wedding and invited bank officials from all over the world to attend. But when the guests were taken to a make-believe bachelor's party, heavily armed agents arrested them.
They were pretty shocked. These guys are the top guns of the money laundering world.
In all, 39 people were arrested, 3 of them from Miami, and the personal banker of Panama's General Manuel Noriega. Never before has there been an indictment of a bank as big as BCCI.
What is really important here is that we have indicted an international financial institution.
Late today from the Miami branch of the Bank of Credit and Commerce, agents hauled out boxloads of bank documents and ledger. Some of the arrested bankers are already talking, but the bank itself is denying any wrongdoing.
And we're in 72 countries of the world. We almost obey the laws of the country wherever we do business. And we are very distressed, like you, about the charges that have been filed, but do believe confidently the bank is not guilty.